March 13th. Does anybody have any comments? So I guess, before we do that, since we don't have a quorum of regular members, do I need to,
You could,
have Rich and Hebe as?
sure, I mean, it's,
If there's a vote, yeah.
yeah, so, minutes,
In order to
yeah,
approve the
minutes are,
minutes?
well, technically minutes, I submit them and I allow you to make changes. I don't have to.
Mhm.
So it's a, you know, the minute taker kind of has the last word, but, so the minutes, it's kind of unofficial voting, but nothing wrong with appointing people to,
It's better to look
Well,
like we have a full
I'd
club.
like,
Yeah.
I'd like to appoint, Hebe and Rich, although Hebe was absent, so.
I can't vote
Her
on
vote
the
on the
minute.
minutes.
I can't
really-
vote either, so.
Yeah,
Oh,
well, but, you and I. So if they, so I guess that would be 2-0, with two abstentions.
yeah. I'm not, I'm,
So, Mr. Chair, I would move the minutes as written.
well, I have actually a minor change,
Oh,
or,
okay.
on item 2, the, fourth line down, the board considered a survey to solicit information about how the town, how
how
the town
it feels,
feels.
yeah.
And also, about housing in Lyme and the region's need for housing. I'm wondering if we wanna say the board is considering, rather than considered a survey.
That's fine with me.
That was the only,
Yep.
thought I had on it. So, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as adjusted, say aye. Aye.
Right.
Okay. So we have a discussion of possible zoning ordinance changes and also, just a little bit on master plan housing chapter. I'm wondering how we want to proceed on that. I think, there's also some, are we allowed to talk about things that are not on the agenda?
We can just call it new business and,
Because there's some legislation that has recently passed, and I'm not,
Well, it hasn't passed actually, but it's in the works.
or it's in the, well, I thought it passed one of the houses, either the House or
The
the
Senate,
Senate.
it passed the Senate, but not the
Okay.
House, so.
and I do get the legislative update from the,
Municipal Association.
Municipal Association, that's why I usually send that out, it comes in on Fridays, and I do try to,
Is that what you sent around too?
Probably.
I think so, yeah, maybe.
Which maybe stepping back for a second, do I understand that there was legislation that is going to prohibit the municipal association from advising its members of
yes.
legislation
Yeah,
that
well,
might be of interest to its members?
Well, it won't prevent that, but it will prevent them from lobbying for
Having a
town.
position,
Right.
or taking a
I
position.
think, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
not just the municipal
Well, it's-
association, it's
right.
any organization.
Any
That was-
organization.
That was HB 456, which I think was voted on either yesterday or today. So I haven't heard yet how that went, but.
Yes, so it's an anti-lobbying legislation.
Which I was surprised to see such a strongly worded statement coming out and saying no to this and all.
Well, it also would prohibit select boards from speaking to their legislature about issues.
Good Lord.
Yeah,
Isn't that interesting?
yeah, that was one of the.
So,
It's pretty
so
scary.
there's two, I guess I see now as two separate issues. The select board should always be telling people what is on their mind. Because
They're
if,
the representatives of the people.
yes, and if they don't get a lot of blowback, they're probably gonna do it. So that's okay. For the, I mean, I had always seen the municipal association as providing legal advice and other sorts of advice to towns about, you know, how to open right to know laws work, how does this work, how does that work, you know, do we need a quorum to,
Mhm.
and for them to opine on matters of public policy seem, well, I was very surprised to see it.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, I think
I
it's-
guess I'm accustomed to it,
What,
since I worked in Vermont and was
you know,
active with the Vermont Municipal Association.
Well, I think what it is in the legislature, it's people that are on the other side, quote unquote,
Mhm.
that don't wanna see the municipal association give their opinion negative to what these people, you know, they're trying to stifle any other
Yeah.
opinion. It's, you know,
Yep.
very scary.
So,
Very scary.
Right, I mean, it would be fine for the municipal association to say, if this happens, this changes the way all these other laws, and are you sure you wanna do that? I mean, that's proper advice from council under all circumstances, but.
Well, they
So
are
anyway.
a lobbying organization for municipals, and anything that
So interesting.
takes away
Mhm.
the authority of a municipality, they are against.
Interesting, I was not aware they were the lobbying, that that was an official function.
Yep.
Oh, okay, fine, so I'm not, I guess, I'm no longer surprised that they sent that out.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, good, bad, or indifferent, that's what they do, they do
Mhm.
try to, you know, they do communicate with, you know, town officials too, and, you know, again, the
They do
legislative
a very good
updates.
job with that
And,
communication.
you know, they let them know what's going on,
Mhm.
and, I think they do work into the best interests of, municipalities.
Yes.
And so, you know, and they provide that voice that, you know, volunteer select boards may not have the opportunity or the
Mhm.
time to be able to go to Concord.
Or to go to town council. It's
Right.
like, is the law clear here? Do I have to not go to town council to do this?
And when you read the updates, they will say why they
Mhm.
disagree with a particular,
Okay.
you know, amendment or whatever, you know, they're very clear about why they're, against it.
And all the implications. Yeah, I had a good talk with Brody Lachey, I think his name is Lachey, at the Municipal Association. And
Mhm.
he was explaining to me pretty much what's happening. The majority leader, Jason Ormsby, I think his name is, he is, for whatever reason, trying to get all these bills through.
Mhm.
So what he's doing is he's handpicking people to be on the committees for these, you know, to discuss these bills. So what they do is they vote unanimously for the bill, then it goes into what they call a consent calendar. And so, once it's on the consent calendar, that means that everybody's voted for it, then a lot of the legislatures don't pay much attention because it's been unanimously voted. So it often doesn't even get to the floor for anybody to really understand what's going on. So that's how they're trying to rig it to get these bills through. He was explaining that to me, that's what they're doing essentially, and so it's not great.
Oh,
It takes 10 representatives to take a bill out of the consent calendar. So you have to have 10 representatives to say, we wanna take it, you know, to be discussed. So, yeah, it's pretty scary, I mean, you know, it's not great, what's going on.
Did he indicate how often they get 10? I mean, with
No,
a
he
body of over 400 people, I would think getting 10 would be fairly
Right.
easy, but
Yeah.
maybe
But if
in practice
they're
it's not.
unaware of if they don't pay attention to what the bill is,
Yeah,
Yeah, because they see it's in the consent calendar and they're so busy, they just.
yeah, everybody else
forget about
approved it, so it must be okay.
it. Yeah.
right, yeah.
And the other thing that's happening is the lobbyists, the big like all the real estate lobby and all the building organization lobbies are doing a huge job. I mean, they're just lobbying, all the senators, all the representatives. So that's another thing that's happening, so it's really,
they're doing it to community power as well.
you know,
They're lobbying to pass laws so that I've forgotten the right word for it, it's the overruns and costs that Eversource has would be shared across all customers.
Oh.
Even if they're not getting theirs, everybody's still an Eversource customer for the distribution.
Right.
But even if you're not an Eversource customer for supply, they wanna be able to lay the costs
They've
on
got all
you.
your information so they can charge you.
Exactly.
Yeah, crazy. Well, it's quite scary, I don't know. And then see, Kelly out, when she was campaigning, she was really for local control. I mean, I read about some of the things that she said, she was really standing up for local control. But from what I understand now, she's kind of switching, for some of these
Gee,
things.
surprise, surprise.
Um, I just can't believe New Hampshire's, I mean, I can see it maybe in New York or Connecticut, someplace, but how can they just take all the power away from the town,
Well,
I mean, we're supposed to be live free or die, and they're just totally,
Well, I mean, the state of New
Nobody's paying
Hampshire, you
attention,
have to
that's it.
remember, towns only have the authority that the legislature gives them. That is, if the legislature hasn't expressly said, you have the authority to do this, the towns don't have the authority. That is,
right.
There's a magic term for that, a legal term for that, I forgot. But anyway, yes, right,
Oh.
and so the legislature can say, nah,
or the legislature, they don't give the authority, and then,
Yeah,
you
or
know.
take it away, that's what they're doing now, is taking it away,
Yeah.
that we've had for 100 years or whatever,
right,
yeah.
so.
well,
So anyway, that's
Okay,
right.
so, back to the topic at hand.
so, yeah, let's look at what David has put before us with these zoning ordinance changes and,
I forgot to bring the ones that, what's his name, Olin, no,
oh,
Frank Olin.
Frank,
Holes.
Bowles, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we should start with the list that David
Yes, sure.
came up with. And if you could maybe
Yeah, I'm trying to get to them.
help us understand.
So I listed just things that I am familiar with, and the first one was the Steep Slopes Conservation District. This is one I have struggled with, since I got here. And I highlighted the issue of this. At the very beginning, the Steep Slopes Conservation District is hereby defined as comprising of all areas within which there is an elevation change of 20 feet or more and the average slope is 20% or greater. And then goes on, any area which meets the foregoing criteria lies in the Steep Slopes Conservation District, even though it may be part of a larger area which has an average slope.
Less than 20.
Yeah, less. And then goes on to talk about 80% shall be excluded from the lot size calculation. All areas doesn't define anything. So when you try to calculate if the lot is, in a steep slope or not, where do you start? What is an area?
Right, and I think I've heard you say you sort of average it across 100 feet.
What I do is,
And you sort of look for, you slide the 100 feet around to get.
what I do to calculate it is I use the LiDAR data. And one of the nice things is LiDAR data has cells that are 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. And so that is what I, as a zoning administrator, has defined as an area.
When you say 2.5 feet, like.
Square, right, square.
Square. Take a grid, that's, each
Uh-huh.
cell is 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet, lay it across the town. That's
Okay.
LiDAR data.
Right, so then from that, if you can tell what's greater than 20% in each one of those 2 by 2.5 by 2.5.
But that's my own way of doing that. and I understand what the attempt here was to say, okay, if you're developing a place, and then you look at that, the area that you're developing, that's great. Think of Magleby's lot, where you did the steep slopes review up on, just above Market Street.
Washburn.
On Washburn, you know, they had an area that they wanted to develop, and it met that criteria. But trying to look at the entire lot, you know, if you say, well, the area is the entire lot, then, and let's say the slope is, there is a 20% slope between the highest point and the lowest point, now your lot is unbuildable, because your area is defined as that lot.
Well, maybe if you
Well,
think that.
is it though? I mean, if it's the whole lot, then the average slope is probably gonna be less than 20%.
Well, it depends on how you calculate that average slope. If you take the highest and the lowest point,
Come to my house.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you could have a lot that has a slope and then it levels out for 100 yards and then it drops again.
yeah,
So, well, if the LiDAR works for you and the 2.5 square feet, if that really seems to work, maybe we should try to do wording that would.
I mean, so what I do with the LiDAR is I take, and there's a couple of things you can do with it. It's an elevation. It has an elevation for every single 2.5 foot square.
Yep.
Right.
And from that elevation, you can calculate the slope of that cell.
Of any cell, any series of cells.
Well, no, just the cell itself. So I can say, okay, this cell, when I look at the cells around it.
Oh, I see, okay,
I can
right.
calculate the slope.
Mhm.
And so I say, is the average slope 20% or greater of that cell?
At 2.5,
Yeah, that 2.5, you know, how steep is that cell?
right?
If that cell is greater than 20%, then I go out 100 feet on either side of it. And I look at the elevation on either side of that. And then I rotate 18 degrees, do it again. And I'm looking for a slope that's greater than 20% or greater along that 100 feet. And I will walk that line 180 degrees.
Mhm.
And that gives me the slope across that cell. And whichever, well, if I find it 20%, then I know we've met the criteria. If I look for the highest
Mhm, mhm.
So if you took.
slope, then that would give me the slope, the steepest slope through that cell.
But if you did that on a lot, and then you took that out to the actual lot, so you could see, it would be pretty accurate?
Yes.
Probably. Yeah. So, I mean, if that works, it
But
sounds like
that's-
we need to change the wording so you can do that, and you can also.
But that's, again, I'm not sure how to
Yeah.
I don't think you wanna tie it to the LiDAR data.
Really?
Well, because things, LiDAR is a great tool now, but in 10 years, they may have something better. You know, we didn't have, the LiDAR was just coming out 10 years ago.
Yeah, but maybe at that point, the planning board could just say, well, we got something better, we'll just switch it to something.
Yeah, well, but anyway, that's my issue with the steep slopes, that trying to calculate, you know, if you're doing a development, sure, we can figure out, meet the criteria for that development area, but trying to calculate for the entire lot, there is no definition of an area.
Yeah.
And, tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like if an area, whatever, however you define it, has that 20% slope, it condemns the whole lot.
I'm not sure, is
Because
that what it says
even though,
or
even
not?
though it may be any area meets the foregoing lies within the steep slopes concept, even though it may be part of a larger area which has an average slope of 20%. If part of a lot lies within the steep slope district, 80% of such shall be excluded in the calculation of lot size.
Hmm.
I mean, that seems,
I have always taken that as the 80% of that part. So I don't
That's
take.
what it's supposed to say, I think, yeah.
That is how all the conservation districts have always worked, that you take a percentage of what would be considered that district, not the,
Right.
although you are right that.
Well,
It says 80% of
part
such
of a lot
part.
lies within it, 80% of such part,
Yeah.
Shall be excluded.
so I
So-
I think it's,
I think your interpretation is appropriate. I mean, I think there has to be some way to do it, and these words do not specify how you actually do that. I think, seeing as how LiDAR data today is pretty accurate and pretty easy to use, you can just spin that line around the way you said, and say, okay, well, the steepest slope here is bumpty bump, and that either includes it or excludes it.
Yeah, and then what I do is I literally walk through every single 2.5 foot cell in a lot and do that test.
To count up how many of them
Yep.
are greater than the 20%.
Right, and then that leaves me with a very holy polygon. Because, the ground, over 2.5 feet, it can level out, and so it's very easy on a steep slope, you got a big boulder sitting there. That 2.5 feet, that it's 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet, it doesn't meet the 20% criteria.
Right.
So I do weed those out and
Sure.
fill in all the holes as best I can in the polygons.
how do you handle when you have a very steep slope and then a very flat area? How does that,
it sounds like they can
The
develop
LiDAR
on the
would tell
flat
you.
area, right?
pardon?
You can do anything you want on the flat area.
Well, that's,
But if you see, if it's if you take a little LiDAR block and 100 feet going that way.
well,
you-
I do 50 feet in either direction, so it's 100 feet across, but, so, the flat areas tend to show up. And,
Yeah, because the flat areas would tell you they're not.
right, well, that's because those flat areas are less than a 20% slope,
Right.
then they're immediately, they're okay. So the only time I would weed those out is if they are all surrounded by steep slopes.
Which, that's what I'm saying.
But I'm saying.
I've got this flat area with a leach field in it and a slope that goes like this and a slope that goes like that.
The leach field area would be big enough to be picked up, that
Yeah.
it's, because that's flat, it would not,
Cause, yeah, the two, adjacent 2.5 foot sections are all gonna be flat,
right.
so therefore, your average is
So,
gonna
right,
be
so the-
Well,
less than 20.
It's gonna fail the first part of the test. The first part of the test is that 2.5 square foot block 20% or greater in a slope?
Right.
No. So
Right.
it doesn't get included in what, the area that I'm building.
Mhm.
Think of it as I'm walking through all these squares,
Mhm.
every time I find one that meets the criteria, it gets added to the steep slopes
I
that I'm
see.
building. So those areas would never get put into the steep slopes because they failed the first part of the test.
Right, but the proportion that's flat compared to the proportion that's wicked steep the wicked steep stuff would completely overwhelm the flat if you're gonna go with averages for a lot.
No, I think what, tell me
Because,
if I'm
you
wrong.
take the little LiDAR blocks along the downhill slope and you're going 100 feet or 50 feet this way and 50 feet that way.
So.
But it's,
The flat part here is gonna be swamped by the slopey
no,
part.
doesn't, because what I'm gonna do is so you come to the slope,
Mm.
just over the
Yep,
flat part.
just over the edge.
This one's 20%.
Yep,
I look and 50 feet up.
Yep.
Yes, and 50 feet below, that's 20%, so that one gets added to the steep slopes. We come up over the flat one, it's not a 20% slope, so it doesn't even get put into the test.
this is very confusing because, it's not evaluating an entirety of a lot. It's
What
doing
he's
a-
doing, you're doing the whole lot though, right?
Well,
I looked at the entire lot,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, he's doing
so
the
Hebe,
whole lot.
I think the question is, if, well, how to define whether something's on a steep slope? Obviously, so your lot looks like this, and like this.
Yes.
It's a great example.
Yes, I mean,
So
I just.
This is easy.
It's the worst kind of, confounding one.
Right.
It's flat bits mixed in with steep bits.
And so the question is, so it's flat up to here.
Yep,
And then how does David treat the next block over, which is, it's, this edge is here, this edge is
Right.
down a whole lot.
right.
And obviously, I mean, if it were a cliff,
It almost is.
yeah, no.
I've
but
lost
if-
dogs
if-
down it.
If it were, very, very steep, this block would be here, this block would be perhaps in the middle, but the next block would be far down. So that's pretty clear, that if you're looking at the slope of this block, and this one is here, and this one is way down here, the slope of this block in the middle is steep. What do you do? The 100 feet that David's thinking about is, first off, to average, just
Yeah,
a
yeah,
little squishiness.
yeah, fine.
And if there's a big rock,
Yeah,
um,
I'm not worried about those irregularities, I'm looking at the principle of how do you
So-
handle the transitions between steep and flat in a way that really accounts for.
so I think, I mean, this is a question for David, as long as the flat part in the middle is counted as real flat, that's as much of the parcel as it is, and then if he judges this slope here to be a steep slope, then you lose the 80% of it. I mean, is that what's happening? Because,
I know that my lot is unbuildable now, but I'm just trying to figure out how it could be evaluated. It seems like you need to sort of have the worst case
Yeah.
and be able to apply the principle to it.
How do engineers or applicants figure this? Cause I would
They have
imagine.
trouble,
They do it on the ground probably.
yeah, they make sure that, and they look at stuff that's
They're,
steep
they're
slopes.
maybe looking at 2-foot contours.
Yeah,
Right.
What is LiDAR? Is that 2 foot or 5 foot, or does it depend where you are?
2.5.
well, LiDAR it's not a contour, it is an actual elevation at the center of that 2.5-foot block.
But the LiDAR data produces maps that are,
Right,
that have
with contours.
contours on them.
You can, yes.
Right.
So David, if you
And
had,
presumably that's maybe what some of the applicants are
That's
using.
post-production, that's done by GIS software. It's
Yeah,
not-
you can, through there's, you tell me what size distance contours you want, and I'll give them to you.
Yeah.
right.
You want 6-inch contours, I can give you 6-inch contours.
So David, if you
Yeah,
had,
they-
let's say you had a 5-acre lot,
Yep,
okay, and you're gonna do these 2.5 squares over the whole lot. So when you're done, could you do a map of where the steep slopes are and less than 20% over the whole, that 5 acres? You could, right? You could draw a map of where it's steep and where it's not,
yes.
right, so, right? That works, I mean, so like for your lot, he could do it on your lot, and you'd have a map of where your steep slopes are and where they aren't.
But the steep slopes then create a conservation district on my land?
Is
Yeah,
it
it would be a steep slope.
is zoning, not like a conservation easement, but that's where people get very confused with these terms. There are the conservation districts.
Yes, right here.
Right.
And that's,
But,
So on your lot, you'd have to take away 80% of just the steep.
80% of.
Just the steep slopes.
80% of 90% of my lot.
Yeah, well, whatever, but, yeah. But that's the way it would work, I think.
But it seems, it's like zoning is a way to sort of manage areas. And it seems like creating a conservation district that's less than one lot size.
Well, no, it would be when you take your lot and your neighbor's lot and their neighbor's lot and their neighbor's lot and add all these areas together, and it covers the entire town.
But it says it's creating a conservation,
No, it says it's part of the conservation district. It will be included in the conservation district.
Yeah, of the whole town,
So it just means it's areas in town that are steep,
right.
just like we have agricultural conservation district property that is agricultural land, but it may or may not be in agriculture presently.
yep.
It's just that it meets the definition.
I don't have your
of that.
lot done. I have your neighbor's lot.
Oh, yeah?
And so you can see, right around where their house is,
Yeah.
and there's some areas in the back.
That is the purple the steep stuff? or
Yep, the purple's the steep stuff.
Yeah. He's got the mother of all non-conforming
Right.
lots. I'm just trying to think of I'm not trying to build in a steep slope, and I don't think we should, I'm not saying that, I'm just trying to come up with a straightforward way we can go from,
Well, yeah, I mean, if
LiDAR
David's not
analysis.
here and the next zoning administrator doesn't do this kind of stuff, or,
Yeah,
that's
well-
why I was asking about what the applicants do, cause,
Yeah,
I mean, maybe the applicant puts the burden on the town to say, I'm gonna do it unless you tell me I can't.
Yeah, I think, what they do is they, you look at it, if you're, like McAleese, they looked at, they said, okay, we have this flat area, and its average slope across this flat area, it's not 20%. So therefore, it's not in the steep slopes, even though we have steep slopes on either side, and if you did a average across all of them, it would be all steep slopes. But because it says an area, they chose that as an area. And, I can't argue with that because the zoning doesn't tell me what an area is.
Right, but it seems
Okay.
like if you did an actual map of the lot, whatever the size of the lot would be, so you know where all the steep slopes are and not, that's all, that's fine, that's all you need. Then you can say, well, you could build here, because.
Yeah, well, that's what
That's what you did, yeah.
And, when I ran my algorithm on Magleby's lot, that area that they wanted to develop came out as,
Right,
see, I guess it feels backwards to me. It feels more like you wanna say, you can only build in areas where the slope is less
Oh,
than
actually,
20%,
that's-
and you have at least this much contiguous area. You see what I'm saying?
So that's not what this
Well-
is saying.
No, I
This-
know, that's why I'm saying
Well,
it's
I
kind of.
mean, and this is saying something, they don't care where you build. This is not telling where you build, it's saying if you've got this much flat area, and you've got this much steep slopes, you can add to the lot size of the flat area and increase it by 20% of the steep slopes. So that's the only thing, if you wanna build your garage or your whatever way up on the steep slope, I don't think there's anything in the ordinance to prohibit that. I mean, maybe there is, but,
yeah, you can't build on steep
you
slopes.
can't build on steep slopes. But,
you can't.
no, if you look at the.
Okay, all right, so I'm wrong, but,
But did we allowed a driveway though on the steep slope, didn't we? How did that happen?
Where was that?
There are
For
special
mag-
exceptions
maglev,
that are
whatever
available
that is.
for, if you can build it in such a way that it, yeah, I'd have to look at you have the conservation districts, which are section 327, and then there's some, a little further on I think it's in the fours, there's more stuff that talks about what you can and can't do in those districts. These are just the definitions of the districts.
It just seems like you could say, you have to have this much area and you can use 20% of a steep slope next to you if you need to get this area.
Now, this does allow I believe, and again, I haven't calculated it, but let's say you you had a flat area that, or steep slope come down to a flat area, and you wanted to set your house into that steep slope, which is not an unreasonable, walkout basement.
That's where the garage is.
Yeah, this would, as long as the elevation change wasn't 20 feet, which, you're not gonna go that high up into the slope, you could build into that steep slope, at the toe of the slope.
Which elevation change?
When you're looking at the areas which the elevation change of 20 feet or more, and the average slope is 20% or greater.
From the floor of the garage to the top of the slope behind it is more than 20 feet.
But the area that you're trying to develop, an area,
Because you would dig that out presumably with
Yeah.
an excavator, so that would be level into the slope.
Yep.
right, but your slope would come down to it, but your area that you're trying to develop could extend into that steep slope a little bit, because until you hit that criteria of the 20-foot elevation change over that area.
Right, and then, so we're starting with the definition, the definitional question, and then what's the rational thing? You say, well, from the floor of the garage to where it
Yeah, you can.
comes out into the ground, if that's more than 20 feet, is this ordinance prohibiting rational development? I mean, if the back of the house was 100 feet above that, well, no, that's.
Yeah. But anyway, not something I think we're gonna solve tonight.
No,
but that's,
no, it's kind of too complicated.
Well, it sounds like to me, if David's figured out a good way to do it.
Well, I have figured out a way, and
Right,
that
anyway.
that to me seems to be a rational, reasonable,
Yeah,
and that defensible.
I think he's looking for more clarity on what an area is.
Yes, that's really, because if you're trying to develop an area, that's easily defined, because this is my development area, this is where I wanna put my house. But it's that second step of calculating the steep slopes for the entire lot.
What would you like it to be?
I don't know.
Ah,
I've thought a lot about it, I have in my mind a way of dealing with it, with, the LiDAR. And it has been, since the steep slopes conservation district mapping that we have, a previous zoning administrator looked at steep slopes across contour lines and basically measured 100 feet along every single contour line in the town. And anytime you had an elevation change of 20 feet, she would include those in the steep slopes. I look at areas and I disagree, and every time I look at a lot, I sometimes weed out some of these areas that are, but it takes me extra time to look at these things to say, no, this does not look
Right. 'Cause
correct.
Yeah, because 20
So-
feet is too big, probably.
Yeah.
So do we have a map that delineates these?
There is a map that was created by a previous zoning administrator. I do not like it. I think it's
For the whole
bad data.
town, it's for the
Yeah.
whole town.
Yeah,
You
it does
think it's
not.
bad data because you think it's too strict?
I think it
It's
grabs
different.
areas that are not really in steep slopes.
So it flags areas that are not,
Yeah,
that ordinary people would say, that's not a steep.
yeah.
And you can tell by using your LiDAR. You can-
Right, I can tell just by looking at the contour lines.
Right.
so how, can you work through, as you evaluate lots, can you update?
That's what I've been doing is I work through lots, and I run the process and add it to my list of ones that I've done, and
Or do you just create a loop that goes through all the LiDAR blocks?
oh, I could very much do, I just do it by,
You're not doing it by hand, is what I'm saying.
yeah, no, I have a program that does all this.
Yeah.
So David, if we had tons of money, the town had tons of money, we could hire some expert person, they could do the whole town with the LiDAR, and we'd have this great map that was accurate.
Well,
I
David
could do
could
it.
do it.
Or you could do
I
it,
could-
if you had time, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's just, I need to spend some more time to have it run. My biggest issue, and this, no offense to IT people, I ran this program, I set up my data on the network. I ran the program it ran for about 8 hours before I killed it for not completing. And tweaked it as best I could to get the speed up. Still could not get it to run at a reasonable time.
Can't we leave things to run overnight?
No, because it logs me out after a certain amount of time.
I bet that's fixable.
I'm sure it is, but.
So, I mean, the other
But
thing.
let me finish.
Yeah, go ahead, finish your
So I
story, yeah.
moved the data to my local drive,
Uh,
and it completes in 3 minutes.
Ooh,
And so I talked to our IT person, and he's like, there's nothing wrong with our network, it's gotta be your program.
yeah.
Yeah, I just, there's something in there that, that the network is slowing. So now that I have that,
So,
local, I can
right. I mean,
probably run it on, just do a loop to loop through all the parcels and,
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
just-
that sounds like the best answer, because I was gonna suggest, if we couldn't do it for the whole town, obviously, existing lots that nobody's talking to you about, we don't care. And so, when somebody hits the fallback position, which we don't need to do now, but fallback position is when somebody comes in and says, Dave, I'm looking at map 407, lot something or other. You can say, just a sec.
yeah, well, I have no problems, and I'm still, looking at stuff. There, in GIS, there is, this, it's called generalization, where you take, where you have lines that are very jagged, you kind of
Smooth them, yeah.
Yeah, and so, is it perfect? No, because I have to smooth out the lines, because like I say, you're talking 2.5 foot
Right.
squares, so I
Yeah, you
smooth.
do rolling averages or something.
Yeah, so, I've been spending a fair amount of time looking over the data, and making sure that I'm happy with it, that it seems
Sure.
reasonable, because I don't wanna, I don't wanna take away people's, development rights or say, because this map is perfect. I wanna make sure that I'm doing a good job at this.
I think I'd be interested in seeing an example of, not a crazy example, but just an example of how you do it versus how it was done previously. I mean, it does make sense to me that if you have a little bit of a flat area, it should probably be included in the steep slopes, because it's all part of that.
Yeah, yeah, if you have, it just kind of drops down a little tiny bit and.
Yeah, and I don't, the question is, what is a little tiny bit, but, is
my-
that 2 feet or is that,
Yeah.
30 feet?
Yeah, I think the way I have it working right now, it pretty much weeds out those little areas.
But what are you talking about for little areas, like 2 feet, or are you
Yeah.
talking about 10 feet, or?
I'm not sure I'd have to go back and look at my, the parameters I use to weed those out. Because basically what they will do is they'll show up as holes inside the area that I've created.
Mhm.
And I look at those holes and I just,
It's a little hole.
if it's a little hole, make it go away, because it's obviously,
Yeah.
Well, our lot would be a wonderful example of a complicated, contour lines. It's 7.5 acres, it's got a spear that goes up the top of Lyme Hill,
Yep.
it's got all this stuff, it's kind of, comes down, it's flat, and then it goes down, and then it's flat. It's like all kinds of mean, nasty stuff.
Do you think is your lot naturally occurring, or was it excavated to
I think,
kind of a cut and fill? I'm gonna put my house here, darn
well,
it.
that's 1989, does that sound familiar, when our house was built?
No.
that'd be
When
just.
did zoning come in?
Was it
It was
1989?
89, but
Yeah.
depends what month, right?
Yeah, this was like, they
Hurry up and do it
they
before
subdivided
the
and
road.
stuck this thing in before the
Uh-huh.
zoning came in.
Yeah.
Yeah, But I am not quite sure how much, it looks like there's an old logging road that goes through, and then, you know, they've used that sort of for the leach field, but then the area down on the side of the foundation keeps sinking because they pushed all the brush in and put dirt on top of it, and it keeps rotting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a good house, but it's got some wonky shit going on. And, you know, the garage is built into the bank, so it has, concrete buttress things, you know, to support the pressure
Yeah.
from behind. So it's,
Pretty cool.
well, it's kind of entertaining. But it would be an interest, because it's very easy to walk around and then see how this works with the lot. Come over, have a drink.
Yeah.
I mean, would it be interesting to have David compare the previous administrator's map to his map? Is that something
Yeah, I
you'd
can-
be interested in?
Sure.
Yeah, I can do some examples and.
It's only 7.5 acres, so it's not
And
gonna.
you haven't done Hebe's lot yet. so you-
I don't, I've actually, I did, use it as a test subject earlier on, but I got rid of all the data because it was just, it's a test subject, I was not, it was not, the official,
Oh, well, maybe, I'm interested.
um, so, yeah, we can look at that. and-
Go out and collect ground truth.
Yes.
Plus, I've been working on some stuff for the Conservation Commission. Maybe this isn't good. And so basically, I have the entire town on my phone. It uses GPS on my phone, which shows me where I am, and then the green areas are all the conservation easements that they monitor.
Uh-huh,
And so that they can go out and walk around and,
interesting.
yeah, and so we can put this on.
Is there a note on the vision database if there's a conservation easement on something?
In most cases, I believe there are, but it should be in the notes.
Okay.
Does, I know that Lynn's on the Conservation Commission, and she's had questions about these things.
Who was maintaining, Lee Larson was maintaining the list for a while.
Lee has been, and part of the question is that data up to date? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is
That's
that something
why-
you could make a PDF and send that?
Not really, it's,
Okay.
and like I said, this is just, all I did was grab the easements off of Granite, which is the New Hampshire State
Sure.
Clearinghouse for GIS data. They're not.
They have
great-
easements there too?
They have they have the conservation easements. They don't line up real well with everything. They're close, but they're a few feet off.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
Interesting. I didn't know Granite had, I mean,
Granite
Thank you.
is
Granite.
wonderful,
yes, right.
but they don't have any infrastructure anymore. They took it out after 9/11.
Interesting.
Yep.
So, power transmission lines.
Yep, dams, that type of thing are all,
Mm.
Huh.
are gone.
So the water's up here and then the water's down here, it's like, just magic. Okay.
But anyway, yeah,
Okay.
you know, I could set up something on a phone to walk over and see if we fall off where
Yeah.
we think we are. But like I say, I think, you know, we're gonna be close. Is it 100% accurate? No, it's not, but without going out and surveying, you're not gonna get 100% accuracy.
Yep, yep, interesting, that's cool, okay.
But Anyway, that's the first one that
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to just consider, and it's the area in relationship to calculating the steep slopes in an entire lot. Because like I say, I think an area, if you have a development area, that's easily defined. You say, this is our development area, that's the area. It's the, and then the other thing is, I think the wording could be tweaked a little bit to talk about a development area and so how you would calculate that just for, you know, an engineer to be able to figure that out. Because even at this, it doesn't talk about how far the change in elevation has to be Just says, all areas within where there is an elevation change of 20 feet or more and the average slope is 20% or greater. It doesn't,
So we might wanna add your 100 feet,
yeah, and the 100 feet is my,
but it's reasonable.
yeah, my take on it, and that's just, again, I had to make a decision on how to do this.
Right.
And so, I used my
Yeah.
powers as zoning administrator, making a reasonable,
But David, you still need to know how much of the lot is steep slope
yeah,
to know how much to
take out.
take out. So you still have to
Exactly.
figure that,
Yeah,
no matter
And
what.
there, and you're taking that out because, of the amount of developable footprint that you can?
right, when you calculate the footprint of the lot coverage, you base it on a calculated number that is, you take the conservation districts, and there's a formula for how much you need to remove of each conservation district. So, agricultural soils, depending on whether they're national or local, it's 60 and 40%.
Right.
Wetlands is 80%, steep slopes is 80%, shoreland is 80%. And so it's, you take and do those calculations.
So considerably, you could have a 10-acre lot, and you'd only have an acre and a half left,
Exactly.
if, depending on the lot.
I can give you an example.
And what are our tables based on, what's kind of the maximum lot size that it doesn't matter anymore?
5 acres. is-
5 acres.
Yeah, everything was pretty much based on 5 acre, the numbers are based, or, the lot size and the footprint and maximum lot coverage were based off of 5 acre lots.
Okay.
And so when you
So
look at
should the state change that to 2 acres? Do we then only allow 2/5 of what we previously
Well,
allowed
it'd be
for?
based on whatever the lot size is,
But the way it's written now, it's only 50% of the town. So
Oh.
you can, and the towns, in theory, can decide where they want that to be. So we could say it's it's all of East Lyme, all the Mountain Forest District of East Lyme, we could make that the 50%.
That could be larger than 2 acres.
That have to be larger than 2 acres, yeah. Or have to be
But-
smaller than 2 acres, yeah. Well,
So
they're saying that you
nobody
can't
would
have a
want-
lot
Nobody
bigger-
would wanna develop East Lyme into 2 acre lots.
Right, so that's why we put it out there,
Oh, so so you put it out there?
yeah. Well, right, that's the whole idea, because the town is shoving this, the state is shoving this down the town's throat, so we say, well, we'll just fix it, so,
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's the whole idea,
be
right?
careful what you wish for,
Well,
It could
yeah,
happen.
right, and maybe you could change it, maybe the town could change it.
So if the whole lot is steep, but completely unbuildable,
pretty much.
Yeah. But you can't build in steep slopes.
right, and you're not, even taking 20%,
Well, even if you had a 100 acre lot and that was all steep slopes, your 20% gives you 20 acres.
right,
You're still finding a place that meets that you're allowed to build, because when you go to the
and
section
that's section,
4,
yeah.
it talks about steep slopes. It's going to say, here are the things you can do, and here are the things you can't do, or you can do by special exception.
I see.
And that's you're gonna not be able to build. So, here's a lot that I looked at today. It's got 1.402 acres. There's 22,997 square feet of shoreland. And so when you take out 80% of that, 80% is you're losing 18,398 square feet. And it brings your lot size down to 0.979 acres.
Is that a parcel that I'm familiar with?
You should be very familiar with.
Yes, okay.
So
Is,
there's no
so
other.
shoreland is what, 100 feet from,
200 feet.
200 feet from seasonal high water?
So there's no other conservation districts in that lot?
In that lot, but,
Just that one?
so now your maximum building footprint, now because it is only an acre and a half, it is It should be, you know, the minimum would be 3 acres for where that is. Your building footprint is 853 square feet. So no building larger than
Is that,
800.
what is that, 6%?
2%,
2%?
or is it 6%? I'd have to look up, which I can never remember. And then you get 5,120 square feet for lot coverage.
Right. You know, 800, that'd be like 20 by 40, which is bigger than a lot of houses, I guess.
No, that's lot coverage.
Oh, so you have to include the,
That's all buildings together. You only have 853 square feet per building,
per building or total?
per building.
Sounds like again 20 by 40.
So you could build a house that was 20 by 40,
Is that 20 by 4?
Yeah.
and then you could build a
Garage is 20.
garage by
Yeah.
20 by 40. Yeah, so that's pretty big.
Let's move on to
Yeah, so,
next
Hmm.
item.
all right, we talked about shoreline conservation district, no
Right.
underground fuel storage tanks permitted.
Yeah.
That was, the board said that they wanted to continue looking at that.
I can, let me say that I'm trying to reach Mike Hensley because he came to the public hearing here and said, you know, it's my understanding, he'd like to see a special exception permitted, which would allow the fire department to examine the proposed plan, and if they say, that's according to code, or that's according to whatever the national standards are. So, I've reached out several times.
For propane.
Propane tanks, yeah.
Yes.
Oil tanks, no
No
thank
way,
you.
no thank
Yeah,
you.
right, exactly, so.
He expressed a preference for burying them.
He was pretty clear on that,
He
yeah.
was.
Well, they found, the other end of Goose Pond Road this afternoon, somebody went off the road and hit 3 propane tanks and broke one open.
That's
Oh,
cool.
oh, I
Yeah.
heard
All the
that
way down
explosion
on
all the way
Route
to our
4?
house, I heard that.
Yes, closer to Route 4.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
heard
they
that
had-
explosion, I could
Did
see the
you?
flames from our house. It was
From your
dry.
house?
Oh, there was an actual explosion?
I don't know, wasn't,
No, I'm just
Oh.
teasing.
well, I think there was an
I
explosion,
don't-
but they shut down Goose Pond Road for quite a while to, while it was venting until they could get it.
Jesus,
Yeah,
I
so-
didn't really see it.
Yeah, underground propane tanks can be
much better.
much better, especially if you're on a curve of a road,
Mhm.
and people could go off that curve.
That's right. Yeah.
So the wetlands, where do we stand with the wetlands? That's,
Well, wetlands, I think, are a different animal, and I think flood-prone areas.
so we're saying no?
That's the board's decision.
This was specific to the shoreline.
Yeah, this was specific to the shoreline,
Right.
and, you know, I don't see an issue with reviewing all of them, just to see if that makes sense for them, but.
This is buried propane tanks, any place? Is that what you're suggesting?
No, well, I'm saying, the conservation, you know, if you're not in a conservation district, bury them all you want, that's fine.
Right.
And that's how it is now.
Right.
It's just within the water,
Okay,
one, so that where they're not allowed. And this one, I think, you know,
I see, and so in a wetland buffer or something like that's the same,
yeah, I
the
would,
same rules.
yeah,
It is reasonable to expect the same rules would apply.
yeah. And like I say, in flood-prone areas, I really would prefer not to have tanks that could bob up and float away.
Yeah.
Um,
But there again, I think Mike said that.
Yeah, you have to-
You put a weight on it, you attach it to a concrete slab.
Yeah, it can be done, and if FEMA actually, if they still exist in the next 6 months, they have
Yep.
ways, they talk about ways of anchoring them that is safe, but.
Within the flood zone?
Yep. So even, you know, within flood zones, again, I'd prefer not to see it because, you know, it's gonna cost the person putting in it a lot of money because I'm going to require an engineer sign off on it. And so, that it is been done correctly.
Yeah.
So, all right, ag soils. I've been fighting with this one again since I started 17 years ago. This is, the issue is that the talk of subdivision in the last 10 years being applied to the parent lot. It is almost impossible to be able to do that, and I'm not sure if it's even legal. If you allow a lot to be subdivided as a planning board, and then don't divvy up the ag soils, and then someone comes in and says, I want to build a house, I need ag soils, I wanna build my house over here, you have to create a compact shape for that 25%, which would have to extend into the other subdivided lots, which are not owned by the person coming before the zoning board to get this done. And so it's forcing the zoning board to have to apply things to lots that are not under their control at that time, that the application doesn't cover. And I do not see it even being able to be held up in court if the zoning board said, okay, we'll put 25% of the parent lot, we'll split it across all the subdivided lots. And then somebody, a few years down the road buys one of the subdivided lots and wants to put the house in an area that is not part of that compact shape that was decided before they even had a chance to know anything about it.
So David, what's the reason for this incredibly complicated language?
It's to prevent somebody from coming in and saying, I want to subdivide a lot, and then come in and say, okay, now I want my 25% for each of the lots, and I want my 120%, 5% over here, 125% over here, 125% over here. It's to try to keep the development all in that compact and preserve, and not break up that ag soil. The solution to this would be to put it on the planning board in the subdivision regulations to break that up at the time of subdivision. So that the owner of the parent lot would have to show, okay, we're gonna do ag soil, so we need a building zone developed on the plat, and it would have to be enforced through the planning board at the time of subdivision. And then you don't have a problem.
So for each lot, you already know what.
You
where it
already
was.
know where you can develop on those ag soils, and then you've created a compact
Right,
area of development.
right.
So that would be,
But the other thing to remember is that they don't automatically get 25%. So
Well,
they only get the amount that they need for what they're gonna do. So you can't say they're gonna get 25%.
well, yes, but that's,
Well, but they should, I mean, in their own defense, they should be asking for 25%. So what's?
But they won't
so-
get
but
it.
If, I wanna talk about the 25%. If somebody subdivides a lot, that ag soil is forever broken up. Isn't it? I mean, and
You
so.
know where they build.
no,
No, if you've got a parcel and you cut it in half, if there's a big blob of ag soil here in the middle, that's forever broken up.
Right. The
Oh.
subdivision.
Well, it has two different owners, it's not broken up.
Yes, but somebody wouldn't be mowing across property lines or
Right.
They
planting
could.
corn, they could, but
Yeah.
Right, but that would be the purview.
no guarantee.
Right, that would be a decision, private decision between the two landowners, but.
Right.
And so the prohibition is on building on the ag soil, if I'm remembering this right. And so specifics. I mean, I was before the board with this exact question. Whether this was part of the exact question. And the problem was, the good place to build was where the ag soil was. I mean, not surprisingly, that's the flat place and all, and because we wanted to use more than the 25%, that was gonna be problematic, even though that was, I guess that's it. There was a small spot of ag soil. It was a really great place, and the rest of it was crummy soil. And we said,
I mean, it was not defined as ag soil.
crummy soil is non-ag soil, yes.
Okay.
And so the right place to do the development was on top of this ag soil.
How big an area was it, the ag soil?
Building site, I mean,
Really small.
it was not real big, right. I don't remember all the
Well, it
details.
sounds like there's two problems. One is breaking it up, and the other is assigning reverence to small spots of agricultural soil that may not, you know,
Right.
enough for a community garden, but not enough for a bunch of corn. So, I mean, maybe a definition of how much area agricultural soil needs to cover for it to be protected.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, let me just read something here.
Yeah.
So this allowance of up to 25% does not mean that the applicant is automatically provided the maximum 25%. The wording of up to and may, not shall, makes this clear. This special exception is founded upon the definition in 3.27.4 shown above. In that context, the less encroachment, the better. For instance, if the proposed use can be reasonably accommodated on just 15% of the ag soils, then that would be the decision more in accord with the primary objective of the district than the maximal 25%. Likewise, having the encroached area be a contiguous compact shape would minimize the destruction of usefulness of those soils and therefore would be more consistent with the primary objective than if the shape were broken into multiple separated pieces. Dividing that acreage into non-contiguous and non-compact areas would create less practical access and efficient use of those soils for agriculture. Additionally, requiring a contiguous and compact shape avoids oddly formed, dispersed, or otherwise impractical area of ag soils. So I think the intent of the ordinance, I mean, just what it says, is that you use the least amount of the ag soils that you can, because that's the whole point of it. I mean, 3.274 is founded upon the agricultural soils conservation district definition, including the town's agricultural soils are a scarce and vital natural resource, providing the benefits outlined above. So that was the whole point of the thing, was we utilize, or we take the least amount of ag soil.
Sure.
So I think it's got, over the years, it's gotten, at least, you know, it says 25%, everybody says, oh, we get 25%. Well, they don't, really. I mean,
Well,
that's-
it doesn't make a sense, because the other issue is the 75%. In all cases, 75% of the agricultural soil shall be protected by a zoning easement. So the zoning board gives you 10% of an area, because that's what all they say you need.
Right.
How do you determine where the other 75% comes from? You now have 15% floating somewhere that you can use in the future, but you're being forced to put 75% of that into an easement that you can't change. And so you now have to define where that 25% is.
So you're thinking that somebody might wanna
Well,
get it in the future? if-
Why not? Well, why, you say, I'm building a house today, and you say, okay, you need 50, or you need 10% of that ag soil to
Now,
build this
5
up.
years later, I wanna put an ADU on.
Or I wanna put a garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand, yeah, no, I know.
And,
It's not-
outbuildings, and so you have, but you are forced at that time to define where that 75% is.
Right,
And so you can't look, I encourage people all the time, every time, to ask for the full 25%. because this is so poorly written that, you can't define that, you're trying to figure out that 75% that I have to put into an easement. I don't know exactly where, so get to a larger area that's going to pretty much cover whatever I could need in the future and be done with it. So you're not making multiple trips to the zoning board every time you want to expand a
No,
little
I
bit.
agree, it's not clear. It's
So
not
is
easy.
that what the practice has been, is that people who are developing agricultural, within the agricultural district, that they
They ask for the 25, the full 25%.
they ask for the full 25%?
Yep, I don't know
Those
why
are
you would,
approved, right?
typically, yes.
Okay.
So I think that there's a problem though of small areas of agricultural soil being protected that are become meaningless.
Well, there is no area of agricultural soil under 3 acres.
Okay, that satisfies me then. But
and
is that by, how is that, where's that, how do you know that?
Is that the last sentence in that paragraph?
Nope, because the USDA did the ag soils. They're the ones that determined where ag soils were. And a gentleman by the name of Ray Lobdell did most of the ag
Okay.
soil, or did all of the ag
Okay.
soils in Grafton County. And when speaking with Mr. Lobdell, he told me that they did not include anywhere that was less than 3 acres.
That covers it then, thanks.
Yeah, so that's,
So, I mean, essentially what you want is a sentence added to this that says, make the owner of the parent lot do the shenanigans before the subdivision, right?
Right, well, I've put it on the planning board in the subdivision regulations to break up, or, have this say, at time of subdivision, that ag soil will get divided across. And even at that, we're looking at trying to develop a contiguous compact shape is not necessarily going to work. Let's say you have a U-shaped set of ag soils that you have 3 lots you're subdividing. You have ag soils that come around into 2 of them. You can't do a contiguous compact shape because it just doesn't exist.
In that case, then you're out of luck.
Well, then that's what the planning board needs to tell the applicant at the time of subdivision, that we can't approve this subdivision because of that. So again, that's why this needs to
Yeah.
get pushed onto the planning board's
Subdivision regulations.
subdivision regulations to say, here are the rules, and I don't care what the rules are. It doesn't, but make it clear to the applicant at the time of subdivision, not bring it up, 5 years down the road when they go to
Right.
try to build on a lot. And the zoning board is trying to look at this and say, how do we make this equitable for everybody? We can't
Yeah.
say that this lot, we can't restrict this lot that has nothing to do with this application.
right, no, that makes sense, I mean.
So tell me though, how many of these actually happen? What is this 10-year period though? If it was subdivided more than 10 years ago, then,
It doesn't count.
so I mean,
I mean, Farmer Jones, 50 years ago, subdivided his lot.
well, say 11 years ago.
Yeah,
Well,
then,
I mean, so 50 years ago, yeah, everybody's dead, so this is the way it is. And this is and then you get to the 11 years ago, it's like, boy, did I make the right choice.
yeah, now you don't have
Or
to.
you just wait for 10 years and then you can,
Well, but, I mean, that's on,
I think that's
Well,
unreasonable to wait
yeah,
10 years
I
after you
mean-
subdivide to be able to build on a lot.
Yeah, probably.
right, but, I mean,
in the whole.
given the amount of subdivision that happens in town, I mean,
Well,
it doesn't take that long for 10 years to happen, but I guess what I'm saying is.
Do you wanna
that-
wait 10 years?
Um,
You know,
It
especially-
seems like there probably aren't that many lots that have been subdivided less than 10 years ago. So, I mean, if we start from now, it won't really impact that many.
No, it won't impact, but that, to me, it's just needs to be
But we should address it so that it's not
It doesn't,
continuing
you're
to
not
linger.
creating more problems
Yeah,
every year.
So David, what would your suggestion be for the planning board or for the subdivision regulations?
Well, that where there are ag soils on a property.
So this is more than 3 acres of contiguous ag soils?
I would, again, I would have to look at a lot.
Yeah.
But basically, when the planning board, you're going to look at a lot.
Right.
And if that lot has, a large enough area of ag
Appreciable
soils.
ag soils,
Yeah.
let's worry.
Yeah.
We have the map, so we can
Right,
look at the
right, right,
parent
yeah.
lot and say, hey, there's a ton of ag soils here.
Right.
The planning board could either create an area, contiguous area for the subdivision, which I'm not sure, again, how that would work well, because I'm not sure you could create, especially if the lot has a lot of ag soils. Create a contiguous area that would only be 25% of the ag soils. That's the other thing, is trying to, let's take, if you go out the East Thetford Road, there's, on the sharp corner there's a barn.
Yep.
If you look at that lot, when David Roby went to buy it, they valued it by looking at how many subdivisions you could get out of that lot. And they partly wanted to run, you're allowed one driveway for every 2 lots. So you you could put a driveway across the field
Mhm.
and get into 2 lots.
Yep.
And then due to there's actually a lot of clay soils in that field that is horrible for septic. So they were limited by septic, so they had to put lots at the other side. And then just have a big lot in the center that really didn't do much. And you could not create take 25% of those ag soils and get it in a contiguous shape to all those lots.
So is that lot now subdivided?
No, it's not something, they were looking at it doing what could be legitimate subdivision. How many times could you subdivide it so that they could value it?
Yeah.
I think we did 4, I think, on that.
I think 4 was what the,
Yeah, I think we already came up with it. But
but anyway, that's where, trying to break up.
But we're saying, David, that if you can't build on the agricultural soil, so if there's a place to build that's not on agricultural soil, that's where you have to build.
Right.
Right.
And that's where they tried to put things, but again, they did have to go across the agricultural soils to get there. And so you would have to, use that for your driveway.
Right, well, then you try to put it on the edge, not across the middle, obviously, yeah.
But, so you put stuff on the edges, you're not gonna get a contiguous compact shape along the edges. You'll be kind of U-shaped, and you're probably gonna get more than 25% to get that U-shaped. So
But so you're saying 20, why do they need 25? Because they're gonna
Or-
build on the non-agricultural soils, right? So,
well, or if they need to,
They're gonna build where it makes the most sense to build.
but if they can't on agricultural soil, if there's any other
Well,
place to build.
We're saying, what the hope is that they would use, what this language is implying is that they would only use at most 25% of the ag soil.
Well, but let's say you had a 10-acre lot,
Yeah,
and 7 of it is agricultural soil,
Right.
you have to build on the 3 acres. You can't build on the
Is that-
7 acres.
well, no, unless there's.
That's what the ordinance says.
No, it says non-developable areas. So if you have steep slopes coming down, those are non-developable.
Right,
So, it does not have sufficient developable agricultural soils. So wetlands, steep slopes, those are all.
I see, so that
right.
if you've got this big parcel with ag soil in the middle, the preference would be to build around the edges.
Yeah,
But if that's not possible, or that's not your choice, I mean, you own the land, the ordinance says you can only build on 25% of it.
Right, but I think the ordinance says that you, if there's a place to build it's on non-agricultural soils, you have to do that, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's what it says.
no, you're twisting it too much. You have, if you have, do not have sufficient developable non-agricultural soils. So
Right, if you don't have
sufficient soil,
sufficient non-ag- yeah,
so
non-
areas that you are able to build. If you don't have enough area that you could build because of other factors,
Right, right.
then you're allowed to build on up to 25%.
Right, right, exactly. I just mean that if you have
Then there's not a problem.
sufficient land that's not on the agricultural soil, that's where you have to build. That's
Yes,
all I'm saying.
yes, but
Yeah,
that's-
I see.
This
Right,
is,
right.
you know, the case
So
where
if you wanted to have a view and the view happened to be on the agricultural land,
you're out of luck.
you can't do it.
Yeah.
Right.
If you've got other,
If you
if
have-
other parts of your
Right.
property is,
Yeah, that's the way it's written.
yeah.
And that was the
Is that what we want?
intent. Well, if we want to protect agricultural soils.
I would think so,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, and am I reading this right, that none of this applies to parcels that have fewer than 3 acres of ag soil?
No. The only thing that, if there's less than 3 acres of ag soils, you don't have to put the zoning easement on it if.
I see.
Wait, but I thought you said that,
I thought it was not, it took
that
3
the
acres.
smallest agricultural parcel
So the
is
smallest,
3 acres. I mean, but the 3 acres could be, you know, an acre on your property, an acre on your
Right.
neighbor's property, and then
right,
if they all come together fairly
Uh-huh.
closely.
right. The ag soils do not follow parcel boundaries. They are,
But if they're not at least 3 acres, they're not identified as.
you're not gonna identify an area as an agricultural soil
Right.
So
unless
that's
it's
what
greater than 3
Lawville
acres.
said.
Yeah,
So, in other words, if there was a 5 acre piece and there was an acre and a half of ag soil on that 5 acres, he didn't count that.
if it was a standalone piece of
Right,
ag
unless
soils,
he
it would not have been, it's just considered an
But
inclusion.
if
in-
across, but if it crossed the border, boundary line and there was another acre and a half on the next lot
So
over,
you
then that
put
would
it-
be,
Yes,
that would
that-
be 3 acres.
Right,
Right.
right.
And
So he didn't care about boundaries, he was.
No, they didn't, there go, he cared about the ag soil
That's-
boundaries and that's it.
That's it, you're right, okay, I got it, yeah.
So, anyway, just, again, it's one of those that's somewhat problematic, and I think
Fix it in the subdivision, right?
fix it in the
I
subdivision.
I think that's reasonable.
And try, you know, it may need to change the 25% area. David Roby was suggesting recently, a 2 acre minimum, where if you wanna develop, you get 2 acres of the ag soils, you know, cause that would be a reasonable
Hmm.
area for development,
Instead of the 25.
instead of the 25%.
Yeah, that might make it easier, I guess, I don't know, maybe.
And that would also, again, you keep it into a compact.
Mm.
And if you gave 2 acres across subdivisions, subdivided lots, you know, it would deal with a problem where yes, it would be broken up a little bit, but it would still keep the majority of your ag soils.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, it's
And-
not an easy situation.
And you would look at, you know, when at subdivision, like you were saying, you know, you want a view, too bad, you know, you need to keep this development closer to the road because you don't wanna extend it into the ag soils. You know, so it's something that the board, you know, should look at the time of subdivision, then everyone is aware of it and no one gets blindsided
Right,
Yeah.
and no one's trying to, you know,
right. And the other thing I think, David, we should think about too, and we've talked about it a little bit before, is whether soils of local importance, or some soils that obviously are not really gonna be used for agriculture, except for maybe grazing sheep or something, but are counted now because they're local importance. So whether we wanna try to, I mean, that's gonna be complicated too, but.
well, when you look at
But we'll
a
figure that out.
description of a soil and it says very stony, as part of the description. I sometimes wonder if that's,
Right, and it sort of comes down to each individual case, really, I mean.
and the interesting thing was that, there were fewer ag soils at the time that the zoning was written, and then there was a, change in the zoning that brought all of them back in. And
It
so-
changed to the Lyme zoning?
Yeah.
Huh.
And I forget the timing, but, yeah, the original, list of ag soils was less than what it currently is now.
I mean, from Ray Lobdell, I mean.
Yeah, the description, you know, when you look at the soil types, there were less,
Fewer types of soil were classified as agricultural.
yeah,
Right, so now does the USDA divide them in between national and
yes, but
local and?
the ones that were included in those haven't changed, all the classifications are the same.
Right.
The individual classes that were in the zoning to start and then now changed. And I don't know if that was by error or omission or intent, but
Yeah, I don't remember.
It's probably planning time.
probably. But anyway, that's my issue with the ag soils.
Yeah, well, that'll be easy to fix.
So can I just summarize and then we'll move on? So for a subdivision, if there are fewer than 3 acres, nobody cares. You subdivide it any way you want.
No.
Okay.
The 3 acres, the only issue with 3 acres is if there's less than 3 acres of ag soils on a lot,
Mhm.
and you need to use a portion of those ag soils, when the zoning board gives you approval, they don't require you to put
Put an easement.
an easement on
All right. How
the
does
ag
that-
soils.
How does that square with Ray Lobdell's 3 acres?
They have nothing to do with each other.
Okay.
They're
Right.
completely, it just so happens that,
If the agricultural soil on a lot is not contiguous in 3 acres, crossing boundaries, then it's not counted as agricultural soil at all.
no, that's not true. If, no, I'm sorry. If you have a area on a lot that's 3 acres, or I understand what you said. When they were classified, yes, if there was less than 3 acres anywhere,
Right,
because they don't care about
a
lot
lot
boundary.
line, right,
Then it was not included as part of the agricultural soils.
right,
Okay, good.
that's what I.
I'm sorry, I misinterpreted what you said, so, sorry, my apologies.
So, let
Sorry.
me keep going here. So you got this 10 acre parcel, and you got an acre here, you got an acre there, you got an acre over there. Is there ag soil on that parcel? Now,
Yes.
we need to be concerned with.
Yes,
Okay,
Cause it's 3 acres, so Ray Lobdell would.
no,
No,
it has nothing
it's
to,
not
it just
3
happens that 3 different areas of ag soil have extended into that lot by 1 acre. So you have
Oh, okay.
just 3 pieces of ag soils.
Okay.
You know, there are lots that,
Without knowing more about the adjoining lots, you don't know.
right, and you don't really care, because
Mhm.
the 3 acres for the easement is just a number that was chosen.
Sure, I understand the easement piece now.
Yeah.
And so the proposal is, we tell an applicant who comes in, you need to do a survey, you need to do a soil survey on every subdivision.
Or use the
Or use the state maps.
Yep.
right, the state or whatever maps, right, okay. And then you subdivide. And it's really hard to think about this 10 years and all.
Well, that's-
I mean,
yeah, that's why I say it.
what advice does the planning board
What the-
give to the applicant?
It doesn't give them any advice, it says, it
Okay,
tells
right.
them
What rules does it lay down?
that you are building on agricultural soil, or you're proposing lots on agricultural soils. The board at that time is going to look at those agricultural soils and somehow decide, and that's, remains to be seen how the board wants to do this, decides on each lot where on those ag soils you could build. Now, you may look at it and say, there is sufficient area over here that you can build without being on the ag soils, so you don't get to build on any of the ag soils. This lot is all ag soils because of the way you subdivide it. We're gonna give you a little piece near the road. This lot over here has a ton of ag soils, but wetlands over here, can't build in the wetlands, so we're gonna give you a little piece of the ag soil here. And that's where you're going to have to do your development. And that's done at the time of subdivision, so that when you go and sell the lot, it is on the plat saying,
So all
build
up and
here.
up, all on the up and up,
And no one,
no surprises.
no surprises, no.
Yeah, that makes sense,
Mhm.
yeah.
And, that's where the 3 acre waiver might come in, that if it's,
You don't even need to worry about an easement because you have, at the time of subdivision, defined where that's going to be. You're not going to build anything beyond in those ag soils, so it's protected.
Right, forever and ever, yeah.
I think, Rich, what you're trying to say, or what your questioning is, if the parent lot had less than 3 acres of ag soil to begin with, then there's no definition, there's no requirement to define where,
Cause it wouldn't
You
be
can
counted,
develop.
Lobdell wouldn't have counted.
Well,
no.
no, you have a tongue.
Raised irrespective of lot lines, so.
Yeah, so you have a tongue of ag soil that comes in that's less than 3 acres, that's the only, my recommendation for the board was look at the subdivision and look at that 3 acres and say, or 2.9 acres, whatever, look at that and say, are you, that's not a
Does it make
buildable.
sense? So,
Yeah.
so the planning board would say, does this make sense? Do we think that's a reasonable way to subdivide it?
Right, and,
But,
and look at it and say.
and if it approved it, then that particular subdivision wouldn't have any restrictions in the future.
Well, no, you
For
would
building on
say,
it.
you would restrict and say, you can build everywhere but on those ag soils.
Well, I thought you said if the parcel had less than 3 acres of ag soil, then.
No, if it has less than 3 acres of ag soil, the zoning board of adjustment, if they are giving the special exception, does not have to require
Conservation
a
easement.
easement on the remaining
The
75%.
conservation easement, okay.
So that is the only thing that has to do with that 3 acres.
But that means that in the future, that lot owner can come before the board and say, I wanna encroach some more on the ag.
No, because you define that ag soils as a non-buildable area on that lot.
No, but I thought you had said if they have less than 3 acres of ag soil, you don't have to put an easement on it.
Right, but that's how it currently is. What I'm suggesting to the board is that when you do the subdivision, if there are ag soils, you would say that's non-buildable. You would show
Oh,
where you can build and where you can't build. That's a no-go right there.
yeah.
You can build all in this other section, and,
Okay.
But David, just so I'm clear, if you have a 10 acre lot, you've got 2.6 acres of agricultural soil on that whole
yep,
10 acres. That's when Ray Lobdell,
no.
well, you
No.
said he didn't count any.
Ray does not look at lot lines. Ray
Right,
looks at ag soils.
right, but there's less than 3 acres. If it's less than
It
3
wouldn't
acres,
be
he
called
doesn't count
3
it.
acre, it wouldn't be called agricultural soil
Right.
unless that 2.9 acres was connected to another piece of
That's what I'm
agricultural
saying,
soil.
that's what I'm saying.
It crosses the border.
Right, so you've got 10 acres.
Yep,
And within that 10 acres, you've got 2.6 acres of ag soil, and it doesn't, that's it, it's right there, so he doesn't count that.
it would not have been counted, no.
Right, that's what I wanna make
Yeah,
sure.
it would never have been
Right,
part of the
You wouldn't
conservation.
even know that it was agricultural soil.
exactly, okay.
If in that 10 acre parcel, it was in the middle,
Yep,
and it was less than
Right,
3.
and it didn't touch any other
yep, then
agricultural
we
soil.
would never
Never
have made
been-
it into the maps
Okay.
of the,
All right,
the USDA maps.
Right. And then, yeah, he probably picked 3 acres because it's hard to farm less than, I mean, with tractors.
Or, no, I think it was because, you know, they weren't, they didn't have boots on the ground testing soils, they were looking at aerial photography and based it all off of
Oh, yeah.
aerial photography,
And
slope,
vegetation.
vegetation.
Right.
Yeah, if you look at that, they follow the field lines, because, you know, the farmers are pretty smart, they know where they can grow and where they can't.
But I think anybody who's concerned about agriculture could go out and get a core soil sample, get it redone.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, is that, you know, if you have a soil scientist go out and,
Yeah.
do, you know, map out the soils on your property, and they say, no, this is not correct, then I'm gonna take that over the USDA maps.
But
Sure.
they might map and say, well, this is actually wetland.
They very well could.
You know what?
And you know what they actually like to do? They like to define it as soil types not in Grafton County. And so they don't match any of the stuff we have.
Hanover,
And they say therefore it's not agricultural soils because it's not.
Oh, lordy.
And then I reject those and say, no, go to these manuals and use these manuals to, you know, you have books, you know, a set of manuals about yay big
Yeah.
defining.
Hanover got mad at my brother on the backside of Moose Mountain because he pulled a bunch of rocks out of a field and made a wall around it, and they said, oh, that's wetlands. Now, you have to plant wetland vegetation plants, that he had to go to Massachusetts and buy a trailer load of wetland vegetation, which he spent the rest of the summer watering because it was a very dry summer. It was- So if you think, these regs are crazy, Hanover's even nuttier.
Yeah, well,
All right,
All right, so the next one is,
that's easy.
Mix.
plan development is the
Plan
next.
development.
And it's a mix of residential and institutional or business use on a single lot in more than one building on a single lot. And my only question is to the board is just to look at plan development and see if this is really what you want to consider. Or if you want to, you know, what I'm actually thinking is Mr. Keith's area over here where he would like to have one lot and do a small cluster development, but has to put in a business use. And, you know, you may wanna leave plan development alone and add something new.
I think the problem when I was talking to Rusty was that the list of acceptable things for businesses
Yep.
is rather restricted
It's
and
very
probably
restricted.
out of date. Like, you could put a cobbler in, but you can't put an office.
Right, and he wanted the adult bookstore and it wasn't on the list.
That's right.
And, you know, Lyme needs one of
Outrageous.
those.
Oh,
That
sorry,
was-
folks.
That sent us off the edge.
Here, I'll hand this up to you. I think we lost the power cable to it. I mean, I would be content, I mean, I've thought a little bit about this, and it would seem reasonable to me to say that plan development could be 100% residential. I mean, that seems, I don't think that's outside the spirit of the definition.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Rich. I never quite understood what the reasoning was. I don't know what I'm missing. that-
I think it was-
You
it
have
was
to
to-
have commercial.
Yeah, well, I think,
It expands the coverage areas, I think. Doesn't a plan development is less restrictive on lot coverage, I think.
right, I think that I have to look some more, but
If more dense development, you
Right.
can put more units on it,
Exactly.
and this and that, and.
And you can't do that with just residential housing.
But, so you,
rebooting.
so if you have a building with, you have commercial retail on the first floor, or part of the first floor, and then everything else could be.
Right.
But if you had that retail there, commercial, then you could do more residential.
I'd have to look through the whole, I didn't include everything in the plan
I
development.
know that, but I don't.
But, again, this is something that, I don't have any specific changes. I know, you know, Rusty's, would like to put in 3 houses and, you know,
But when he went to look at the list, he had somebody who wanted to do, an office for outpatient psychiatry. Not allowed, it was an office. He had somebody who wanted to put in, like, a fabricating for doing, you know, like the contractor who wanted a shop. That wasn't allowed either, because the list on that table is so restricted.
Yeah, when you look at the list of table
it-
4.1, the business uses that are allowed in the Lyme Common District. A new office building is not allowed. So if you had, even if you put, opened a single building to put an office in, it wouldn't be allowed.
Right.
Um,
So if you had three different, like Rusty wants to build three different buildings, would you have to have a commercial in each one?
No, just
Right?
one.
Just one of them.
Just one of them, right,
Right.
so, yeah.
Right.
I think, you could change plan development to be either residential or a mix,
Yes,
or create a new type of development, clustered development, where you have,
Allowing 100% residential and expanding that table, I think, fixes the problems.
Yeah. We get the edible store in there.
that's right.
Or, you could do businesses in conjunction with planned development that's more allowable, if you wanna continue, if you don't like the idea of light manufacturing, in the Lyme Common District.
That's hard, but that would need a clear definition.
Yeah,
Well,
what
I mean,
is
you had
light
Green Mountain Studios was light manufacturing for years.
Wooden toys and things,
Yeah, and that never seemed to cause a problem.
Right.
but it was before zoning
Yeah.
too.
Well,
Light
that's why-
manufacturing or processing activity which does not create objectionable noise, smoke, odor, dust, dirt, noxious gases, glare, heat, or hazards to health by reason of fire, effects of industrial waste, psychological effects, and generation of motor vehicle traffic or otherwise.
So is the
So-
wood shop allowed?
I don't see why not.
It's loud, a lot of dust.
Yeah, but light manufacturing is not, it's not allowed in the Lyme Common District anyway,
But
so,
Ray had a wood shop in this building,
but before zoning.
was it?
Would Veracruz garage be allowed? I mean, it's grandfathered now, but if you wanted to put one in,
That wouldn't be manufacturing. I mean,
I
No,
think
but
it
it's-
would be, what would be considered service use,
But it's
which would be under,
traffic, but it's traffic and it's,
Well, it's, I mean, good heavens, it's, 20 cars a day?
but again, I would
Yeah.
consider it
Right.
service use, and it would fall under a site plan review.
Yeah.
But, like I say, a wood shop, but, the thing about a wood shop is you have somebody running a big planer
yep,
for all day long, that could be very annoying
that's
to
what
neighbors.
Veracruz garage used to be.
Of course, it depends on what.
Yes, it was tuck away lumber.
If the windows are closed,
Huh.
We used to get our
you don't hear much.
shavings for our horses from there.
I used to buy wood from them, I was very sad when they closed down, because
Right,
it's
David.
no longer a place to get
So,
wood.
Yeah, we bought a lot.
going back to planned development, if we changed A to say at least 15% shall be reserved for residential use, a planned development may be 100% residential, that completely solves that hurdle. And then if, we can kick the can down the road a little bit to figure out what kinds of business uses might be allowed.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
the request is that, from Mr. Keith anyways, that doing 100% residential in the areas that planned development is allowed. It's not allowed in all districts either.
Right.
So would that solve Rusty's problem?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So the only reason that he didn't wanna do it, because he had to put some commercial in one of his buildings.
Yeah, and that's,
oh, it was a stumbling block. I mean,
and
It's just a hurdle.
yeah, right now, what he would like to do is,
Single office, right? He could have just had an office.
no, because you're not allowed to
you
have
can't
it.
do a new office.
Oh, because it's a new
You
building.
can build a house and then convert it to an office, but that seems silly.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, that's, again, the conversions is the next one. But, yeah, the idea that you have to put in commercial, or his current plan is to condoize everything but not build it until let the condo owner build it. And then, you run into the problem of, well, how do we guarantee that the condo person who buys that lot builds a commercial portion?
Right.
Or does somebody say, well, I'm not going to buy it, and it sits there as an empty piece of land and it never gets built, and so it's always in violation.
Right. I mean, I think specifically for Rusty's question is just allow him 100%.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure that that's a bad, I don't see any negatives.
Right.
Especially with the need for housing.
And actually to your point, not every part of town allows planned development, but if we say, oh, I know, let's put planned development over there, we already have the rules written down.
Yep.
So it's just,
Right. And
I'm running out of gas, guys.
Yeah, I
Seven,
agree.
nine.
Close to 9.
let's see, what do I have here is
any quickies.
Actually, David, on 4.42, the last one, that seems like it'd be pretty easy to fix, wouldn't it? Just add state highway,
oh, yeah, that,
that's no big deal, right?
yeah, that one is just,
So we could fix that one.
that was one that came up recently, accessory dwelling, okay, well, let's do that one. Both units share access to a town or private road. If you don't have if you wanna put an ADU on a state driveway, or a state road,
Right.
you're not allowed.
So how did the two that are on Route 10 go?
Because I am reading this, that it is, if they are on a town or private road, they have to share access. State roads are excluded. That's how I'm reading that.
Say that again, I'm not following.
So I'm reading that, and I maybe, the board may disagree with my reading of this, but my reading is that a single detached accessory dwelling unit may be added to a lot with existing or proposed residence if both units share access to a town and private road. I am saying in my reading of that if they share an access on the town and private roads.
They need to do that, that's what
Right, they need to do that on a town or private road. They don't need to do that on a state road.
Right. Then they have to get a driveway permit from the state.
They have to get a driveway.
For a second one.
Yeah.
So the
So
question is whether.
Lopez's are sharing a driveway onto Route 10,
Yep, so that's not a problem. But if you look
but it's
at,
not a town or private. Oh, you're saying it says nothing about state, so it's permitted.
right,
Right,
But Boland's, it faces Shoestrap, but they're talking about an access off 10.
if that access off of Route 10 would be up to the state to,
I see.
at the time that the permit was given, their access was shared off of
Shoestrap.
Shoestrap.
Yep.
If you look at Christine Brown's property,
right.
Up on Preston.
No,
Next to
It's on Route
Washburn.
10.
next to Washburn,
Washburn.
just
Right.
north of Washburn. She has sold that property to her granddaughter, and her granddaughter is going to put an ADU and put a new driveway in,
Off,
A
off.
second
Off
driveway?
Preston.
off of Route 10.
Really?
Why?
Yep.
So just one driveway to the ADU.
Yeah, one driveway to the ADU, one driveway because of the location of the ADU. The current driveway, you would have to extend it
Oh,
around the
yeah,
house
I gotcha.
Right.
and over to it.
So you're saying that,
So they're gonna put the ADU on the north side of the.
Yes.
Gotcha.
right, so you're saying, David, that the way you're interpreting this, it's fine, they can do that.
Right, because
Because the
it's,
state will manage whether they have.
right,
can
it's,
put it
and
that
it's,
way.
you only have to share an access if it's on town or a private road,
Right.
not,
And then the board might wanna decide whether, I mean, I'm not saying we should, but if we added state road to the town and private, then we require that they have to share a driveway on the state road.
yes.
So whether we wanna do that or not, I don't know.
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to require a shared access on any, because,
For an ADU?
yeah,
I think we're kinda getting away from the purposes of an ADU if
Yeah.
they're not sharing a
Well-
driveway. Otherwise, you've got a two-lot subdivision, or
well,
a two-lot,
the issue I have with
two buildings.
requiring shared driveways, is in Christine Brown's part, you know, the driveway is on the south side of her house. You have a field, a nice field on south of that, so the only way of putting an ADU in there, you have wetlands above the house. So you really can't get a driveway around, and then putting the driveway, or taking out her driveway and moving it, you're now taking away her entrance. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there may not be too many cases like that.
Right,
In
but,
that
you know,
case-
Well, I mean, she has there's a barn there, I mean, they could put the ADU in the barn.
Well,
To me, it really feels like you're creating
Yeah,
two residences on a single lot. You're no longer really, it's not an accessory dwelling unit.
But in Christine's case, if we did leave it so that she had to have one, or they had to share, could she get a special exception from the ZBA for
no,
that
there's
case?
no special exceptions for that, it'd have to be a variance.
And variance would be hard to get, yeah. She'd have to show that she can't do something that everybody else can. Yeah, okay.
And, you know, it just, you know, say put it in the barn, you know, the cost of refurbing an old building versus building new. You're
That's
putting.
not our problem.
Yeah, well, that's, again, you know, trying to make realistic
We'll have to think.
opportunities for housing.
We'll have to think of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, that's the issue.
I thought it was gonna be easy, but I guess not.
I guess not.
I thought, oh, we could just add.
And then I'm gonna go through the other two real quick. The conversions, that was the same issue that homeowners Connecticut had, that
Yeah.
the structure's less than 5 years old, you can't convert it to anything, unless it has plumbing and heating, you can't convert it to anything other than a single dwelling. I'd like to see the board just review that and consider if that's what they really wanna do. You know, do you wanna restrict converting older buildings to just a single dwelling? Or do you wanna allow, you know, somebody to convert it?
Save their barn.
Save their barn and put an office
Right.
in it, you know, or somebody who has, you know, a doctor or a psychologist buys a house and wants to put an office in their barn.
And
So
maybe an apartment.
It may be an apartment,
Or that'd be an ADU.
no, it would be a conversion.
Oh, right.
But it would be a single dwelling, so that would be allowed, but
With an office, I meant an office and a
yeah, so
apartment.
I think that there are other things other than a single dwelling that would,
In keeping with the spirit of preserving
Right, as
Well,
long as,
traditional
as long as
structures.
it was an older building, right? We'd have to put some, because I think what we wanna avoid is somebody, you know, a developer building
Right.
a house and then say, a month later, say, oh, I'm converting it to 6 units.
right, well, you can still put in structures less than 5 years old, not served by heating wire, shall not be converted to anything other than a single dwelling,
Or, right.
and it lists several other, you know, things that are allowed in the district,
Right.
but not converting to, or just say may not be converted to a multi-dwelling. That solves your,
But I don't like that either. I mean, I would like
You
people to
like-
be able to put multiple
well, I'm saying,
apartments
In an
into
old barn,
in a
you
big
say.
old barn.
no,
yeah.
the structure's less than 5 years old, that were not, that, or or structures that were not served by heating, shall not be, well, the less 5 years old shall not be converted to a multi-dwelling, and then you can go beyond, if it's not been served by heating, plumbing, then it can only be.
Right, in a building that's older.
Right.
Right.
So you could rephrase
Yeah,
that,
we could fix
to a
it, yeah.
better way that would say, you could convert existing structures to allowed uses.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, no, I agree, Hebe, I think it would.
I know
be
everybody
bad to
says
have
it costs too much to convert old barns, but I mean, if you can get 6 units in one, it might become
Yeah,
terrible.
yeah, and in reality, there aren't that many in the whole town that people are probably gonna do that with anyway, really.
Not immediately.
Well, or.
Well, and this 5-year-old thing, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I think for it to be of use, it would wanna be, 50 years old or.
Well, I think the intent originally was so that you don't, you can't build a new multi-dwelling, from the ground up. So you build a building that's a shell, and then you say, now I'm gonna convert it, and now I've put in 6 units.
Right, well, that was.
That is to
saying, yeah.
prevent that from happening.
Okay.
It's not to prevent somebody from taking a barn, I don't believe, taking an existing barn, but it does because of the no heating, plumbing and such. It does
Right.
prevent that. So I think that, just tweaking that area. And then the very last one is section 1040, the special exceptions. There are 14 criteria that the zoning board has to go through and basically consider each one of those, and some of them are good. But the use will be in harmony with the general purposes, goals, objectives, and standards of the master plan. That one doesn't make a whole lot of sense because if you look at the first one, the use will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of this ordinance. The ordinance is built from the master plan.
So we're going in circles.
Right, it's kind of,
Well, it's redundant, I guess.
yes, it's somewhat redundant. The use will not be hazardous or disturbing to existing or future neighboring developments or open spaces. How do you know what's coming in the future?
Well, doesn't that mean at the time, though? Or would
Well, it says
in the future?
existing or future neighborhood
Oh, future,
developments
yeah.
or open space uses. You don't know what's happening in the future.
Yeah, we could just take out future.
Yeah.
And do other towns, other towns clearly have criteria for special exceptions.
Yeah, I haven't looked at,
Yeah,
um,
that'd be, in the interest of time tonight, thank you for introducing this.
yeah, just,
That's some homework we
yeah,
can.
to read through them and say, does this really,
Right, and does the zoning board, can we simplify the zoning board's life?
right, and basically what they do is they will, every hearing, sit down and they will, during their discussion, say, okay, now look at 1040 and see it, does any of these jump out as a problem? And, like I say, some of them are,
Could simplify.
the number 3, where it's conservation commission input shall be, or will be considered if offered and may be requested if there's impact to natural resources.
That's good, right?
As a, knowing a member of the Conservation Commission, sometimes it's, why are we coming out here? We don't know.
Yeah.
It's,
There
was a swimming pool down by Connecticut, and they were asked to weigh in, and it's like, what criteria would we use?
Right, well, there is no criteria for they're basically are asked to look at it and provide comment. And then that's,
And then you get sued.
well, it's only, they're only providing comment. They're not,
Well, that's true.
they're not saying yes or no, they're not giving saying this should not happen, or they may, but,
Right.
it's,
well, for instance, like at the Browns there, the ADU's gonna be partially in wetland, right?
A very small portion.
Right, so
in the
that's
buffer.
why I think
Yeah.
the commission, the Conservation Commission was looking, and that makes sort of sense,
Yeah, well, because it's required by the zoning,
yeah.
so.
You wanna add structure to what input you want from the Conservation Commission? Or is that the problem?
That maybe would help them to say,
Is that the problem?
Well, I'm just, that's, you know, part of the special exceptions, you know, it's just, you look at the requirements in each one of these, it gets pretty tedious. You could actually, like, number 3, I think, leave it as, the site is appropriate location, period. You know, I think we,
Well, I think that's kind of vague, though, what
Yeah.
is it? I mean, it looks like it's trying to,
give some, yeah,
Give
that
some
one, but,
guidance.
anyway, I would like the board to
Yep.
review
Yep.
all 14 criteria
yeah.
and think about, you know, is this,
Well, good.
they do sort of overlap and.
11 is pretty bog-minding too.
yeah,
So David, are these,
Hi.
you know, adequately served by telephone. Well, there's not a whole lot of cell service in town.
No.
And so you could say, well, we can't give it to you because you don't have cell service.
yeah, that makes sense. So David, are these pretty much all the ones that you're having difficulty with?
Yeah, these are the ones that I'm,
So
you know,
this-
I
if you
did not
could-
include Frank's.
Right, oh, the
he's-
other one about, telecommunications facilities. I won't waste your time now, remind me the next time this
Yep,
comes
that's right.
around.
Yes, tell me, that's another one I forgot
Yes.
to put on there, is,
Um,
since I have my.
So you want them
Where-
allowed everywhere?
Where can you
or-
put the
or-
head in for Lyme fiber?
Yes, and, the telecommunications ordinance is, written to presuppose cell towers. And there was careful construction of the permission to say, oh, yes, they can put a shed out on the side of the road, Dorchester Road, well set back.
For line fiber.
For light fiber, yeah.
But yeah, telecommunications has expanded
Yeah.
since, you know,
Evolved.
evolved since when, you know, cell towers were first, you know, and so I think it needs to be updated to include,
To explicitly permit
yes,
fiber optic head ends.
yeah,
That
I keep
nobody
wanting
will,
them to put the cell tower in
nobody
the
will
church.
see.
that would be great. And, I won't go through asking you to look at the telecommunications ordinance because it is a mind-numbing read.
And I even know what some of it means.
Yeah, it doesn't, a lot of it,
So it was a sample ordinance that was provided to the town by somebody?
or somebody who knew a little bit about telecommunications, and wrote it with a lot of jargon that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Today at least.
Yeah. I mean, it does in,
Let's
Shall we
go
adjourn?
home.
Okay, all right.
thank you very much for
Thank you,
listening to me for
Nope,
Yep.
nope, good work.
Yeah.